Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Fallout 4 Mods Weekly. I did take some much needed time off, but now we're back with one of the most important shows on the channel, checking out some of the really cool and interesting mods that have come out in the past week for Fallout 4. And this week we've got a nice variety of mods, not just weapons this time. We've actually got a whole lot of really cool stuff to look at. Some new mods that I've actually never even seen before, so this is going to be really, really fun. But to get us started, we are checking out a weapon mod, and that is the Institute Plasma Incinerator BFG by Micalov. This is yet another Institute weapon by Micalov. I know you guys enjoy these things. Fleshing out the Institute weapon list is definitely a very important task. At this point, we've got a lot of weapon mods now for the Institute, especially thanks to Micalov, but now we've got even more with the Incinerator BFG. This is exactly what it sounds like, a big f***ing gun. This thing is absolutely massive. It runs on cryolator animations, and it's very, very intimidating. It actually has two different firing modes. If you look at the front end of this thing, it has two separate barrels. One has three regular looking barrels on top, and then there is sort of a nozzle on the bottom. And that's because you can actually swap these firing modes out over at the weapons workbench. The top barrel is your standard automatic plasma barrel that actually has three projectiles, as it does use every single node on there. But additionally, we also have an underbarrel flamer. So we can use a plasma flamer or the regular plasma projectiles, depending on which you prefer, which is just crazy. Now, this weapon is definitely intended to be a late game option for the Institute, something we don't really have yet, even from Micalov, so that's a really, really cool niche to fill. And this weapon just looks awesome. Much like Micalov's other weapons, this one is made pretty much all out of vanilla assets, so any retextures you have will apply to this weapon. As you can see on screen, I have a black retexture as opposed to the vanilla white. And additionally, any Creation Club skins you have will also be able to be added to this weapon, so that's pretty cool as well. Now, if you want to get your hands on this thing, like I said, this is a late game weapon, and it'll start spawning in the world after level 30 on members of the Institute. Given how absolutely massive this weapon is, if you want to scale it for even more damage, you are going to need to invest into the Heavy Gunner perk. And finally, when it comes to the ammo type for this mod, the base version is actually going to require munitions, as this does make use of a brand new ammo type known as the Plasma Core, featured in munitions. However, there are two different versions of this mod. You can download a vanilla-only version if you're still not transitioned over to munitions yet. If you do decide to use that vanilla option, it will use a standard fusion core as opposed to the Plasma Core. So yeah, that is the Institute Plasma Incinerator by Micalov, a wonderful new heavy weapon that's definitely very unique. Awesome stuff as always, and I highly recommend you check this one out. Now for our next mod, we have something very interesting, and that is replace male player voice with Peter Jessop by NumbSkullzor. Now, Peter Jessop is a voice actor who you may know as Paladin Danse, and this mod is going to use artificial intelligence to take his voice and apply it to the player. Now, elephant in the room, it's not perfect. This is a very experimental tech, and it's still not got all the kinks worked out, but it is a pretty interesting concept. The reason I wanted to showcase this is because this is the first time we've really had a mod like this, one that completely revoices the main character as opposed to just removing the voice altogether. So now if you want a different voice for your character, or maybe you want to roleplay as Paladin Danse, you have that as an option. I'll go ahead and let some audio clips play without me talking over them so that you can hear exactly what it sounds like. Just be aware, it's pretty robot-y, so this might actually be perfect if you're trying to play as a synth, which I think is really, really funny. Let's go ahead and listen to some of these very human interactions.
You here visiting Covenant, pal? If not, move along. You know, I'm people loitering around. Not good for the nerves.
I'd like to visit.
Since you're a first-timer, there's something you gotta know first. We don't just let anyone inside. There's an entrance test. We call it the safe test. Everyone's got to take it.
Interesting idea. Between you and me, what's the test for?
I probably shouldn't say nothing, but listen. We want to make sure only good people come into Covenant. No undesirables. Nobody that ain't actually what they seem, you know?
You? I don't know you. Just keep your distance.
Keep calm. I'm standing still.
That's exactly what a synth would say. But I don't know. Are you really, human?
Human as the day I was born.
Well, you do look human enough. But I'll be watching you. I have eyes like well, they're good eyes. Got it? All right. We can do business, but no funny stuff.
Alright, for our next mod, we've got something really, really cool, and that is SIP, Shield Integration Project by Ethnet. You may remember a few weeks ago, we covered a mod that added a shield framework into the game that added functional working shields, and it was just a framework that anybody could use to build their own mod. Well, now somebody has. The Shield Integration Project is going to add 8 brand new shields using this framework that are all completely functional and added to the leveled list, so you will actually find enemies using this shield. There's actually a ton of different variants of the shields here that are all for different factions, which I think is really cool, and they're not just the same old shield reskinned. They're all very, very unique from each other, which I think is a great touch. There are some generic shields like ballistic shields and riot shields, but there's also some very specific ones made for the Brotherhood of Steel, Vault Tech, Raiders, Gunners, even the Institute has their own shield, and there's even some improvised shield, one made out of a Mirelurk shell and one made out of a car door, which I think is perfect for Fallout. All of these shields have their own stats and different damage resistances, but they all are very, very useful. Much like the shield in the shield framework, you can melee with these, so they do function pretty well as a melee weapon with some defensive stats, but you cannot equip any other weapons with them. The shield framework does say it allows for you to use a shield with a pistol, but the author has not included that here, as I don't think all of those assets are public yet. But even still, this is a very, very cool shield mod, something that people have been asking for Fallout for a very long time, and now we've got a pretty comprehensive mod that's going to add a lot of variety to the Commonwealth, not just in the shields themselves, but it's also going to change up the way you fight enemies. Running into enemies with shields is going to be very interesting and definitely change the way that you play the game, so that's a really, really cool addition to the Commonwealth. Now for our next mod, we've got a very simple mod called Make Like a Tree by DoubleYou. This mod is going to be a very, very simple tree and flora overhaul that's just going to add a teensy bit of greenery to the Commonwealth. This isn't a massive jungle or landscape overhaul that makes a huge change to the Commonwealth. This is just going to add a handful of green leaves to the trees, and you'd be surprised how much of an effect on the wasteland this has. By all means, all of the trees still look very dead, but some of the leaves are starting to regrow. It has been 200 years after all. Eventually, nature is going to start overtaking, and this looks like it's just starting to. I'm pairing this with the Natural Landscapes mod as well as natural grasses and ground covers, going for a sort of vanilla plus look, and this mod pairs perfectly with that. I hadn't been using any tree mods with that setup. I was using the regular old dead vanilla trees, but I think this is a perfect addition. The leaves aren't too vibrant or saturated, they're still very dull, perfect for the wasteland, but it just adds a very small touch of green, which I know is something that a lot of people are looking for. The huge forest overhauls are pretty cool, but if you're not looking for that and you still want a pretty vanilla look to your game, but just with a splash of green, this is a mod I'd recommend trying out. It's very simple, very lightweight, but it does exactly what it's trying to do, and it does it well. So if you're looking to add a splash of green to your Commonwealth, this is definitely one I'd recommend checking out. It's very simple, like I said before, but it's fantastic. So good job, DoubleYou. This is a nice little retexture. And finally, that takes us to the last mod of the week, which is the TOZ Weapons Pack by J. Snyder. Now, as some of you may know, the TOZ is a real-life shotgun, a Russian shotgun to be specific, which is a bolt-action 20-gauge shotgun rifle. And this thing is very odd. If you've played Tarkov, you'll know this as probably one of the worst weapons in the game. But I've always, for some reason, wanted one in Fallout 4, and a while ago somebody did make a modder's resource for it, and that modder's resource has now been turned into a mod thanks to J. Snyder. So in this mod, you are going to get the traditional bolt-action TOZ shotgun, but you're also going to get some interesting conversions. There's actually a semi-automatic rifle included in this mod, which is sort of a converted TOZ, which I believe J. Snyder says is completely fictional. This is not supposed to be an exact representation of the real-life TOZ. Additionally, there are a handful of pistol caliber rechambers that you can apply to this weapon as well. So instead of the regular old shotgun shells, you can have this weapon chambered in .45 caliber, not only for the bolt action, but for the semi-automatic version as well. And I believe with some upgrades, the semi-automatic version of this weapon can go full auto, which is very odd with the shotgun and allows you to spray shells at a very, very high rate of fire. Now, this weapon definitely does come with some quirks. It is not perfect by any means, though it does add a very cool weapon into the game. There are some pretty interesting bugs when it comes to the position of the magazine with certain receivers, as well as some different parts not being aligned perfectly. But beyond that, it's a pretty functional and usable weapon, and relatively balanced, to be honest. Sadly, this thing is not added to any leveled list. Instead, you're just going to have to craft this thing over at the chemistry station, which could be a plus for some of you, but I know I would definitely prefer to see this spawning on enemies if possible. Given that it does use the vanilla hunting rifle animations, at least for the bolt action version, this could even be something found on Super Mutants, which is a leveled list pool that is severely lacking. The semi-auto version does use the combat rifle animations, so any replacer animations that you decide to download will affect this weapon. Just be aware there is no right-handed version of either of these at this moment, so it will look a little bit funky in your game if you decide to go that route. But whenever you use vanilla animations, everything lines up perfectly and the weapon functions completely as intended, at least in first person. There are a few weird third-person issues, but luckily I don't play that way. Regardless of its quirks, this is definitely a very cool mod, and as of right now, it's the only thing close to a TOZ that we have on the Nexus, so this is something I'd recommend picking up if you're trying to fill that sort of a slot in your load order. With that though, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Definitely some cool mods this week, very interesting ones, and not our typical slew of just weapons. If you want to try any of these out, they will all be linked down in the description below, along with Xbox links if there are any available. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to drop a rating and consider subscribing if you haven't already for more videos just like this. As always, a big shout out to all of my patrons for supporting every single video, and of course a very special thank you to Captain Chaos, Freedom, Glasma, Helljumper, Indecisive Wolf, Kid Hades, Cushy, Logan Rig Maiden, Madly Matt, Mike Arhan, Moonlit Gamer, Oscar, Scott, Sterling, Steven, Timmy76, Youth RC, and Voider for joining that Tier 3 Patreon membership. If you'd like to support the channel over on Patreon, you can do so using the link down in the description, but it is completely optional. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Peace!